Okay, good morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ian Bevington. I head up our propositions marketing team. And as a team, we worry about two things. So we worry about solutions, things like mobile working, cloud, virtualization, customer interaction. And we also worry about, we look after the propositions for about 10 vertical markets. So this morning, what I want to do is share with you some data on what's happening in the communications industry, look specifically at flexible working and collaboration, and also to a small extent delve into some of the Mitel technology. Right, so if we look at the business drivers as they stand at the moment, there's a bit of optimism returning into the economy, but it's kind of cautious optimism at the moment. So a lot of businesses are looking to see how they can resource that growth within their business without increasing their bottom line. So they're perhaps a little bit concerned about taking on too many new staff or moving to new offices and all of the expense that effectively pulls through. Also, over the last 5 years or so, we've seen a big change in the way that our employees behave. So at home, that they're used to using cloud services, they can spin up a new email account or social networking account in perhaps 5 or 10 minutes. But at work, that might be a call into the help desk. A day later, that service might be provided. It might not be quite what they want. So it might take a week or so before they actually get what they need. So there's a bit of a gap there. There is a real trend towards flexible working, and I think there are a number of reasons for that. There's a change in the workforce. The new people coming into the workforce have different expectations about work-life balance, but also over the last 5 years or so, an awful lot of businesses have restructured, and that has sometimes meant that somebody who did work in an office now doesn't have an office to work in. They want to retain that person within the business, and so they've become a home worker or a mobile worker. And then the final piece is the change in our customers, for those of you who are B2C businesses. So all of our customers now are tech savvy too. They have smartphones and tablets and laptops, and no longer is it okay to just deal with a customer by voice or by email. They're looking for social networking and all of those kinds of things. So some big changes, and that really all adds up to the traditional IT model, as we've been delivering it for the last 10 or 15 years, no longer really meets the requirements of this new environment in which we work. So one of the things that we're seeing our customers do is to start to sort of structure the way that applications and IT services are delivered within their business. And one structure we see is a categorization, if you like, between utility applications and mission critical applications. So utility applications, they are applications that are required and absolutely necessary to run your business on a day-to-day basis. The imperatives there are most probably around service levels and predictable cost, perhaps not so much out-and-out capability. So a good example of a utility application is email, and that's probably why you see an awful lot of businesses migrating email into the cloud as a first step into the cloud environment. And then we've got our mission critical or specialist applications, so they are more likely to be specific to the industry in which you work, or even specific to your individual organisation. And they're more likely to be responsible for the differentiation you offer out to your clients or customers or guests or patients. And so you'll probably want to retain a little bit more control over those applications. So they're slightly less likely to move into the cloud. The next piece of structure is around IT frameworks. So we're seeing a lot of organisations now choosing a couple of sort of anchor frameworks, and it might be VMware and Microsoft, Google, or if you're an organisation that does lots of sales, you might be looking at Salesforce.com as a sort of anchor framework for your organisation. So for all of those other applications that fit into that environment, you might be thinking, how does this add value to my IT frameworks? And then of course there's the device piece. So we know that our end users are becoming much more expressive in terms of choosing or using their own devices. We know that they're quite fickle, so every 2 or 3 years that environment changes. So when you're thinking about implementing a communication solution, you'll probably want one that fits with that very fluid environment. So you'll want something that you can deploy on-premise, in a private cloud, in a public cloud, or as a hybrid solution. You'll want something that will fit with these IT frameworks, and you'll want something that will support your users' preferences in terms of devices, both now and in the future. In the case of mobile, it's very difficult to predict the future. So, what do we mean by flexible working? Because there's loads of definitions. So I think at the core of it, it's home working, that is the ability to take an IP phone and indeed your computing environment, extend that over a broadband connection. And traditionally you might be thinking about extending it into somebody's home, but that might also be a small office. Then we've got mobile working, so that is how can we build mobile devices, smartphones and tablets into our enterprise communications network, both to increase productivity so people are better connected, but also so that we can manage call costs. How can we support employees that are moving around between our corporate offices? So one day I'm working in London, one day I'm working in Birmingham, one day I'm working in Manchester. How do we take our profile with us, and how do we better support those employees? And then, of course, for some of you, perhaps in the legal profession or accounting, you might have key knowledge workers that work on the premise of a supplier or a client. So how do we support that environment? And then around the edge of it, there's lots of government legislation now around enabling job sharing, term time work, and also some business imperatives. So how do we support business out of hours, and how do we support peak time activity? So for some businesses like retail, they might be able to schedule that peak time activity. So we know in the retail industry they're probably going to be busy between the middle of November and the end of January. But then in the insurance industry there might be a big storm, so that's unscheduled. How do we resource the contact centre to manage that environment on an unscheduled basis? And then there's all the business continuity bits, which I think Jonathan alluded to earlier on. So we're all very good at thinking about sort of the IT service side of business continuity, but we don't always think about the human factors. So what about, when we've got denial of access to a building or a metropolitan area? What about if there were a pandemic, how would we manage that? What about day-to-day travel disruption because of strikes or snow? And then there's all the human needs about, what happens when one of our key employees has a challenge and needs to be working at home, or perhaps their partner moves away from the area. How do we retain that key employee in our business? So it's not all about the technology. In order to make this flexible working environment work properly for the business, we need to think about how we can manage the customer or client experience. So we don't want that to change just because an employee is working from their mobile phone or their home or wherever it might be. We need to maintain that professional image for our business. We need to support distributed teams to work together more effectively. So there's some huge productivity and business agility gains to be made out of using collaboration properly. So instead of getting your team together in one place every week or every month, do that through a collaboration session with desktop sharing, video, whatever's appropriate for that environment. And it does, of course, mean that you can have more of those meetings, you can have impromptu meetings, and you can make time, and so all of those decisions get made much faster. The other aspect, I think, of distributed teams is we often think about the employees or individuals that might be working out at home, but I think you also have to think about the effect that it has on the team leader, because that team leader can no longer look across the office and see their team, so they need a mechanism by which they can keep in touch They're aware of what their team is doing on a day-to-day basis, and they just feel comfortable about working together, almost as though that team was still co-located in the same office. Then there's the issue of bring your own device. Personally, I don't much like that term. I think it's more about allowing your employees to choose their own device, or maybe even use their own device. We see a lot of that now, as employees tend to work more in the evenings from home or whatever. There's, what are we going to do about the consumer applications? Are people within your organisation using Skype and Dropbox and all of those kinds of things? Is that okay? Perhaps it is, perhaps it isn't. Flexible working really changes the way you attract and retain staff. So, it could be that you've got an employee whose partner's working, moving away from the area, and you want to retain that employee. That's a very simple example. But also, it might mean that you can start to attract employees from your competitor, not through offering them more money, but offering them different working conditions that allows them to manage their work-life balance more effectively. And then there's a huge opportunity to reduce cost. But that's a really, sometimes that's a really holistic thing you have to think about. So when it gets infused into your organisation, then it changes what your corporate office is for. So if you look at this office, almost nobody would consider this to be their place of work, possibly with the exception of Laura. So this is really a collaboration space. It's where we meet with customers and suppliers, and there happens to be a small office area which is all hot desking. So we drop in here, we do 2 hours work, we meet with a client or a customer, and then we might do another hour's work, get on the train and go home. That's what this office is for. And actually, if you take it to its conclusion, then some businesses are getting very close to a point where all of their offices are in fact like this office. And then there's the management of compliance. So it rather depends what industry you're in. But in most industries, you'll probably be worried about health and safety. How do you manage the employees' work environment when they're mobile or working at home? And then if you're in certain kinds of industries, you'll also be worried about things like centralised call recording and those kinds of things. So the link between mobility and unified communications. So this was a piece of unified communications carried out by Forrester Research, and at the moment, the biggest driver for the rollout of unified communications is mobility. So and that really bears out in what we see within Mitel at the moment, that most people that are using unified communications are using it as a tool to enable mobile working, flexible working, to manage a distributed business more effectively. Because whereby 10 years ago, most businesses were defined by their offices and meeting rooms and desks and buildings, today you're more likely to define your business by the people and the way that they communicate. Then we have to look at that UC environment and how it gets extended out to our customers, because we said earlier on that all of our customers have become much more multimedia. They're all carrying smartphones, and it's changing the way they want to communicate. So this survey was done by on behalf of Mitel in the lead up to Call Centre Expo, which was last October. And I think this is the interesting piece for me, the fact that 20% of people now want to communicate with businesses through social media or web chat. So that's a big change. And actually I saw some data earlier in the week that showed the other half of this, which is how many businesses are enabled for web chat and social media, and it's running at about it's less than 5%. So there's a big gap there at the moment between what customers want and what businesses are delivering. It's the age of the customer. It's very hard to build a reputation for customer service, and in a way that's a good thing, because it's a really good opportunity for you to differentiate your businesses from the competitors' businesses, because it's very hard to replicate. Easy to replicate products and services, much harder to replicate a customer service reputation. So this is a comment from one of our customers, Saybeck. They've been at this mobile working, flexible working thing for something like 10 years now. And what you find happens within an organisation is that usually they'll adopt it for obvious mobile workers, salespeople, service people, that kind of thing. But over time, it kind of gets infused into your organisation. So more and more of your knowledge workers, get enabled for mobile working as the business gets more comfortable with it and understands some of the productivity benefits that it can deliver. And then, as we said earlier over time it starts to change the nature of your office, because you look across your office and you go, on any one day, and go, less than 50% of the desks are now occupied, and that's sometimes a good thing. So, coming on to the technology pieces, first of all, taking a reasonably generic look at the components of the mobile working solution. Right at the heart of it is this single number reach capability. So in a Mitel environment, that's part of the core control. So we're not talking about any application overlay at this stage. And effectively what's going on there is you're creating a personal ring group for that individual. In that personal ring group, you put all of their devices. It might be 2 devices, it might be 6 devices, so we're talking perhaps the phone on their desk, a Wi-Fi phone, their mobile phone, maybe a teleworker or their analog phone at home. And then what you do is the individual can tag those devices as being absent or present. When a call comes in, all of the devices that are present ring. If you answer it off PBX, for example, on your mobile phone, then you've got some call control features, so you can transfer the call back to an extension elsewhere in the organisation, come from somebody else. Really useful. The other thing you can do is hand off calls between your devices. So imagine now I'm coming into the office in the morning, I take a call on my mobile. As I step into the office, I get to my desk, I press the button on my phone and I hand that call off back to my desk phone, or vice versa. Mitel's a Canadian company, so I quite often get trapped in the office at 6 p.m. I want to get off on my way home. So all I need to do is hand off that call to my mobile, take it on my mobile. I can be on my way home still listening in to that conference call. So that piece, no application overlay, that's just what the call control does. So the second piece is when we start to introduce the unified communications component. And probably the most significant element in that from a mobile working point of view is this dynamic status capability. So it's where we add presence, if you like. So in that application, what we can do is that we can define a set of statuses. So some of them are out of the box, simple things like I'm in the office, I'm working at home, I'm on vacation, but you can create your own. So if you're in the healthcare industry, you might be in theatre, in outpatients, on ward rounds, whatever's appropriate. And when that status is changed within the application, it changes the absence and presence of devices within this single reach mechanism within the call control. So you're now starting to automate that process of directing calls to the most appropriate place. Now what's good here is that you can drive your dynamic status either manually by selecting it, or you can drive it from your calendar, or from your GPS location in your mobile phone, or from the connectivity. So the way I do that is that I drive it through location. My calendar's a mess. It never worked for me. So my rules are, if I'm within 50 metres of the office, then change my status to in the office. If I'm within 50 metres of home, change my status to working at home. If I'm anywhere else, then I'm mobile. And it stops you walking into the office in the morning and getting to about 10:30 and thinking, calls this morning? It's because they're all landing on my desk at home. Hot desking. So this is a really simple piece of capability. Again, part of the core capability within call control. And effectively that allows you to have a PIN number. You can walk up to any phone in any office, put in that PIN number, and that phone takes on your your characteristics, so it's your directory number, your line key appearances, you're situating that. So if you've got employees that are moving around between offices, that's a really simple thing to do and dramatically simplifies communication. Teleworker, that's simply the art of extending an IP phone over a broadband link into somebody's home or a small office. And then finally, and most importantly, is this collaboration piece. So this is where we build an environment in which distributed teams can work together. Okay, so that's video, desktop sharing, application sharing. If you're within the organisation, you'll most probably be joining that by through clients. You'll have a client. If you're outside of the organisation, then you might be joining that through a web portal. So there's no reason why your clients and suppliers can't join that environment. Okay, so we've got a number of ways that this can manifest itself on the desktop. The first one, which you'll probably love if you've not yet done any UC within your business, is free. Server piece is free, and the user license is free. So it gives you an application on your desktop. You get the corporate directory, you get click to call, you get visual voicemail, you get RSS feeds. So it's a basic client on your desktop, but it's free. As soon as you move one user to the full fat version, then you need to pay for the server piece. It's not expensive, it's 600 or 700 quid, I think. And in the full fat version, you get that dynamic status piece with advisory messages, you get instant messaging, you get full presence information. Or as an alternative to that, you can deploy more or less exactly the same thing through a web portal. So this one, desktop client based, this one, web portal based. So that's really, that's a really interesting way of deploying it, especially if you've got a mixed environment for your desktop. And then, as an alternative to this Mitel environment, what you can do is you can take our call control modules and you can overlay your link environment on the link environment on our voice infrastructure. So you get all of the advantages of single number reach and the mobility pieces, but then mixed with that Microsoft link environment, and I think he's going to talk about that as well. And then the final option is actually to integrate with Google. So we did a first release of this last year, we've got another release of this coming this year. So you can start to integrate integrate with the calendar, integrate with contacts, do click to dial, all of those kinds of things. Incidentally, Mitel are a Google house, so we use Google Mail, so to an extent we do some of that. So that's the office environment, the desktop environment. Just quickly looking at the mobile environment, you can do all the same things in an Apple environment. So you get your dynamic status, your advisory messages. You can do. I should have mentioned on the desktop version. You can run it alongside a desk phone, or you can use it as a soft phone, and the same model here. So effectively, you can be using it on its own, or you can be using it in soft phone mode, which means you can make calls from your mobile phone over the Wi-Fi network. So it's effectively a teleworker set, and it avoids the call cost associated with that might be associated with making a mobile call. And just in the last few weeks, we've introduced the video element to that. So I think now the mobile client has actually caught up in every respect with that desktop client in terms of capability. You can also do all of those things on Android, and you can do most of those things in a BlackBerry environment. The nature of BlackBerry means we can't deliver the soft phone element on a BlackBerry. And again, if you've got some other mobile environment, then you've always got the option to run that web portal version. On a mobile, the big difference with running the web portal version is, of course, it won't have that linkage with the device to be able to detect connectivity or GPS location. So that's the big difference between the client version and the web version. So Now we're coming to implementing it. What do we need to think about? I'd strongly advise that you kind of do a requirements analysis across your business. So identify who is a desk worker, who is a knowledge worker, who's a mobile worker. Just to differentiate those two kinds, I'd probably say if you're a knowledge worker, you probably consider your desk phone to be your primary device. So you might be in the office 2-3 days a week, and you might be out and about the rest of the week. Whereas if you're a mobile worker, you'll probably consider your mobile device to be your primary device, but you might, for instance, want to use a hot desk when you're in the office, and you might want to use a home worker set when you're at home. So take the time to do that requirements analysis, because you want to make sure that you deliver all the tools that are appropriate to that particular user, but also I would say you don't want to deliver more than they need, because you're just making their life more complicated, spending more money than you need to. We've kind of mapped our licensing, or there's an option to map your licensing to those user types. So what you can do now, you can buy either an entry-level user, a standard user, or a premium user, and they roughly equate to desk, knowledge, and mobile worker. So and if you buy them in those formats, they're probably about 30% cheaper than buying them a la carte. Or you can buy these as a starter pack and then add a la carte to top them up, if you like. That's a really nice, simple way of mapping all of those capabilities to particular user types. What we also did at the back end of last year was introduce a UCC virtual appliance. So previously you could buy Mitel Core Control as a virtual appliance applied in a VMware environment. You could buy the Collab piece as a virtual appliance in the VMware environment. So what we've done now is we've created one appliance which is both of those things. So you buy that appliance, you apply those licenses to them, and your job's done. Optimized for really simple deployment, so you can load this up in a VMware environment in about 20 minutes. There's some really cool templating and provisioning tools in there that allow you to very quickly configure that system, get it up and running, all in one virtual appliance. At the moment it supports up to 250 users. By restricting it to sort of that SME market, we've managed to get the footprint in the VMware environment down to a point where it's really efficient. Having said that, it will go up to 500 users probably in June, July time. So you can deploy that on your own premise, on a server, as a sort of turnkey solution. You could deploy it within your VMware cluster if you've built a private cloud solution, or you could take that as a public cloud solution from Britannic and pay for it on a price per user per month. The great thing about that, of course, is it's a more flexible solution, gives you access to lots of support services, you've got great connectivity into that data networking environment to link to all of your mobile devices and really create that very special distributed business which works, effectively works like everybody still works still in the office. So just to pull all of that together, Michelle here is a salesperson. She's got her first meeting of the day is in the office with her sales team. So she drives to the office. Because the sales meeting's in her calendar, that is driving her presence. So as soon as that meeting starts, the presence changes to in a meeting, which means that all of the calls are directed to voicemail. That's what she's decided. When she comes out of that meeting, she's got 3 or 4 voicemails waiting. She could, from her mobile client, she can see who's left her voicemail messages. So she can see very quickly which ones are important, which ones will keep till later. One of them is a client, so she chooses to make that call. She gets home. That client wants to discuss a contract. So as she arrives home, her dynamic status changes to working at home. She gets to a desk. She uses the collaboration environment to link together the client herself and the contracts manager in the office, and they can very quickly have a conversation about the contract, make the changes on the fly, and get that piece of work done probably in 10 or 15 minutes. Doing it in another way might take, by email, getting people to look at it and review it, might take a week or more. So big improvement in productivity. And then at the end of the day, when she's finished working, because her day is defined within a calendar, as soon as she gets to the end of the day, her dynamic status changes to gone for the day, and all of her calls then get directed to voicemail, because that's what she's decided should happen. So, just to wrap all of this up, the art in this isn't the technology piece. All the technology pieces exist. The art in it is understanding how it applies to the individuals within your business, how it can be applied to your organisation, and how holistically you can use it all to drive cost efficiency gains and productivity gains. You can provide an in-office experience from any location. You're effectively trying to create an environment where all of your employees, distributed employees, can work together like they work together in the same office. They can each have a single identity, and if you've got employees, that are customer facing, it's really important that you have a single enterprise identity, because if that employee leaves the business and they're using their own mobile phone and their own, Skype accounts and their own Dropbox and so on, then if they leave the business and they move to a competitor, they're effectively taking those contact points with them. So through this mechanism, where you're giving them a single enterprise identity, you can take that sort of pilot number for that employee and then plant it on another employee, so you keep that client contact and make sure they're always calling you. And I think that's me done. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Bye.